الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والعاقبة للمتقين ولا عدوان إلا على الظالمين وأصلي وأسلم على خير خلق أجمعين نبينا محمد عليه أفضل الصلاة وتم التسليم ثم أما بعد. So we begin as we should and as we always do with the name of Allah, the most beneficent and the especially merciful. And the good end are for those who are God conscious, who are righteous, who live their life according to and prioritizing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala over everything else. Every decision that they make is them thinking to themselves, does this bring me closer to Allah? If so, I do it as much as I can. And if not, if it takes me away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, khalas, abta'id minhu. I stay away from it as much as possible, right? And abstain from it as much as possible. And the good end are for those people. And there is no animosity except for those who are oppressors, the wrongdoers, those who are unjust, and who wrong others. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in His infinite mercy and continence and grace that He send His everlasting peace and blessings upon the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his pure family, his good companions, and all of those who would attempt to follow in their footsteps until the day that we meet our Creator. Allahumma ameen. That's what follows. So firstly, I want to say assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome everybody, and thank you for taking the time to come and to, inshallah, hopefully benefit as we cover the Tafsir of Juz Amma, and more specifically today we're going to be covering the Surah Al-Falaq, the daybreak or the early morning dawn, inshallah. And before I begin with the Surah, and before we begin with the Tafsir or the explanation or the Quranic exegesis of this chapter, I wanted to share a quick brief hadith reminding us about the virtues of the Quran and why we're doing this, and to serve as like a motivation for us to continue to do this, not only communally together as an activity that we're engaged in where the Quran is the center and the anchor and the nucleus that pulls us together, right? That's one of the things we want, that as a community, as a people, that we have different languages, different backgrounds, different ethnicities, colors, right? And at the same time, in spite of those differences, because those differences are by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's design, that there's something that is constantly pulling us together. And it can't be those things only, right? Naturally, you're going to have an affinity to somebody who's from your country or somebody who has the same background. Y'all have a shared history. That's natural. That's normal. But the binding together of Muslims, right, at the heart of that should be the speech of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So I wanted to start today with a reminder to why we're doing this, and that it'll serve not only as a reminder for why we're doing it as a community, but then also to serve as a motivation for us to on our own personal, individual journeys to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because that is something that is absolutely essential, that every single brother and every single sister in here can't simply rely on the sheikh, the alim, the mufti, the maulana, the qadi, the ma'alin. It can't simply be that. There has to be some personal engagement, some personal action, some your own hand in your growth and development spiritually. There has to be. It can't just be, I come on Friday, and if the khatib was hitting and his message was fire, then mashallah, tabarakallah. I'm good for that day, and maybe even for a few days, because mashallah, man, it was just so moving. Or I go on Saturday and Sunday because I have to, because Abo and Hoyo or Mama and Baba, they dragged me there, dropped me off, left me there from 9 o'clock to 12:30, and then came and picked me up. And mashallah, maybe I heard a thing or two or whatever, or maybe I memorized a page or two, and then khalas. But then beyond that, I have no personal engagement, no personal accountability. Not accountability to someone else, but to yourself. Tayyib, with that being said, there's a hadith where the Prophet ﷺ, he mentions, right? And this is narrated by Uthman ibn Affan, where he says, خَيْرُكُمْ مَنْ تَعَلَّمَ الْقُرْآنَ وَعَلَّمَ. That the best of you the best of the Muslims, the best of those who say La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah, khayrukum, are those who ta'allam al-Quran. They learn the Quran. Now, of course, somebody might say, oh, mashallah, khalas, I'm from the best of them. I went to Duxie, you know what I'm saying? I finished that green book, you know what I mean? Alhamdulillah. And I memorized some Quran. But it's not just simply that. Because, wallahi, in all honesty, brothers and sisters, you can take a parrot. Y'all know the little bird? Baghbaga? That's the name of it in Arabic. You can take that bird, you know what I'm saying? Play a CD over and over. Well, subhanAllah, that's just telling y'all how old I am. But if I just played it over and over and over again for him, on a loop, he doesn't know what he's saying. But he can parrot it for you. Yeah, and he repeat it for you. But there's no benefit. That's not what we're talking about. And that's not what the Prophet ﷺ was talking about. خَيْرُكُمْ مَنْ تَعَلَّمَ الْقُرْآنِ. Those who they learn the Quran, meaning they learn it, which may entail memorizing it, but they know what it means, and they implement and practice it. Right? But then, subhanAllah, what gives them this virtue of being the best? Is it simply that they learn it and that's it? No. They have an altruistic nature, that not only do they do it for themselves, that they extend that knowledge and that benefit that they learn for themselves, that they implement and they do for themselves, they share it with others. وَعَلَّمَ. So the Prophet ﷺ, he said, if you want to be from the best of the best, because already the Prophet, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in the Quran, خَيْرُكُمْ, كُنْتُمْ خَيْرَ أُمَّةٍ أُخْرِجَتْ لِلنَّاسِ, that you, in general, as a nation, as a people, as a community, you are the best of people. So out of them, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said they're the best. And if you want to be the best of the best, you have to learn the Quran for yourself. And there are obviously an endless amount of benefits for that. You having a GPS in your life, a true north and a compass to direct you and guide you in what is right, what is wrong, what is truth, what is falsehood. When people are confused, should we be doing this? Should we not? Should we help? Should we not? Right? Even today, subhanAllah, imagine there are people who debate and argue and pontificate and philosophize on whether or not something should be done about what's happening in Palestine. Somebody who you would any other day, you would say, this is a good person. They seem to have their faculties and they got some common sense. And yet, for some issue like this, because they have no furqan, because they have no true north, they don't have the Quran to guide them. They don't have that. But if you want to be the best, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shows you the truth for what it is, then you have to learn the Quran. And then, of course, in doing so, it has to extend to others, that you're somebody who's compassionate, that you care about others. And the best way that you care about them is by sharing the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with them. Right? And so, subhanAllah, that's exactly what we're at least attempting and trying to do. We ask that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make this a gathering where He increases us and blesses us with beneficial knowledge, and that He benefit us by the knowledge He has already granted us. Allahumma ameen. Innahu waliyu dhalik wa qadirun alayh. Allahumma ameen. So I want y'all to remember that hadith. And it's very simple. Khayrukum. And matter of fact, I want you to repeat. Khayrukum. Man ta'allama al-Qur'an wa 'allama. Khayrukum. Man ta'allama al-Qur'an wa 'allama. The best of you. Yes, the best of you are those who learn the Quran and teach others. Now, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us amongst them. Allahumma ameen. So, inshallah, today we're covering Surah Al-Falaq, which is the 113th chapter of the Quran. And one of the first things we want to know is the name of the surah. The name of the surah, right? So obviously we have Al-Falaq, right? Or the daybreak. And this, of course, is taken right out from the surah قل أعوذ برب الفلق. Right? So that's one of the names. And we're going to mention 3, inshallah. The second one, and this is taken from a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, which is in Sunan al-Nasa'i, where he called it قل أعوذ برب الفلق. So just that first ayah, straight from it, he actually called the surah by that first ayah, right? And this hadith, the Prophet ﷺ, he was on an occasion riding on a mount, and there was another companion who was walking, along with him. He was walking on his feet, and he was kind of, so you can imagine the Prophet ﷺ is elevated a little bit, so the Sahabi, his head would be kind of closer to like where the thigh or whatever of the Prophet ﷺ and his knee, right? Because he's riding on a horse or whatever. And so he had his hand on the foot of the Prophet ﷺ. And as they're walking, he asked him, "Oh, Messenger of Allah, could you read Surah Hud and Surah Yusuf?" And the Prophet ﷺ, he said, instead, he responded to him by saying, لن تقرأ شيئا أبلغ عند الله من قل أعوذ برب الفلق وقل أعوذ برب الناس. He said, nothing has ever been read that is more encompassing, right, than قل أعوذ برب الفلق, right? And he just called the surah by that, and قل أعوذ برب الناس. So that's one of the names. Thirdly, is the Prophet ﷺ, and this is also taken from a hadith, he called it mu'awwidhatan or mu'awwidhatain, right? Which we mentioned last week. And that tan, the an and ain indicates like two, right? So that alif and noon, right, is muthanna, right? So it's mu'awwidha or mu'awwidha tan, which means two. And it's referring to both قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ الْفَلَقِ and قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ النَّاسِ, right? And the mu'awwidhatan or mu'awwidhatain, it means the 2 chapters that you seek refuge with, right? Because we explained, a'udhu, it means to seek protection, to seek shelter, to seek some type of covering, to cling to, right? And so you're using those 2 chapters to do just that, so they're called mu'awwidhatan, right? So that's the third name. Now, as far as some of the virtues of this surah, or some of the things that make it stand out. Well, for one, we mentioned earlier that the Prophet ﷺ, he mentioned to Ibn Abbas, he said, "Ya Ibn Abbas, ala adulluka, أو قال ألا أخبرك بأفضل ما يتعوذ به المتعوذون." He said, "Shall I not inform you of the best things or that you use to seek protection with amongst those who seek protection," right? And then he mentioned this surah. So it is the best means of spiritual protection. One of the virtues is that the Prophet ﷺ said, he said, afdal. It's one of the best means of spiritual protection. So that's one of the virtues. And then another, right, is that the Prophet ﷺ, and he told this to Uqba ibn Amir radiallahu anhu, he said, and Uqba ibn Amir radiallahu anhu, he's saying about himself, he said, Amarani Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that he commanded me, the Messenger of Allah commanded me to read the mu'awwidhat, right, dubar kulli salatin, that he should read it after every single salah. So when you pray the 5 daily prayers, Fajr, Dhuhr, Asr, Maghrib, Isha, you should read قل أعوذ برب قل هو الله أحد قل أعوذ برب الفلق and قل أعوذ برب الناس, right? And the reason why we said those 3 and not the 2, because I just mentioned 2 a second ago, if you look here, the Prophet ﷺ, he said mu'awwidhat, which is plural, right? And so in other hadith, he indicates that surah, Surah Al-Ikhlas, which we'll cover next week, right, is included with those mu'awwidhat, right? قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ الْفَلَقِ and قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ النَّاسِ, right? And you see that, right? So for example, when you're making the adhkar, as-sabah and masa, right? The morning adhkar or remembrances or daily affirmations, and in the evening, right? You're supposed to read those surahs 3 times each, right? And not just the 2 mu'awwidhatan, right? طيب. So you got to read it every day. Excuse me, after every salah. Another virtue of this surah is that the Prophet ﷺ, it's mentioned by Aisha radiallahu anha that whenever he used to complain, like he has some kind of pain or some issue, she said, يقرأ على نفسه بالمعوضات وينفث فلما اشتد وجعه كنت أقرأ عليه وأمسح بيده رجاء بركتها. She said that he used to read it all of the time. So we mentioned after the salah, we mentioned the morning adhkar, as-sabah wal-masa, and here Aisha is expanding it even further and said whenever the Prophet ﷺ had some kind of, he complained of some kind of pain or anything like that, right? He would read the mu'awwidhat, right? And again, notice it doesn't say mu'awwidhatayn. It says the mu'awwidhat, which is plural, again, all right? And then she said, and then when the pain became too severe and too much, right, which we mentioned earlier, right, towards the end of his life, right, when he was sick, she said that, right, when he would read, she would use his hands, right, and she was saying that she was hoping for the blessings and the barakah from the blessed hands of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then another thing, and this is the last one, inshallah, is that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam every single night, right? She said, كان إذا آوى إلى فراشِه, right? كل ليلة جمع كفيه. جمع كفيه, meaning every night when he would lay down to go to sleep, he would join his hands. So this is what you're supposed to do. Not like this, but you put them together like this. ثم نفث فيهما, right? So then he would, right? And then he would read قل هو الله أحد, قل أعوذ برب الفلق, and قل أعوذ برب الناس. ثم يمسح بهما, then he would wipe himself. بما ما استطاع من جسده بيده ويبدأ بهما على رأسه. So he'd start like this on his head, wipe over his face, and wipe his body to wherever his hands, right, could reach, right? So give or take maybe like up to his knees, right? But wherever his hands would reach. And so obviously there's more that could be said, but we want to keep it in the time. So I just want to point out this, right, is look how often the Prophet ﷺ is reading these surah. Look how often it is, right? In the morning, at night, when he has a complaint. It would seem, all right, after every prayer, every day, he's reading it dozens of times. So this shows, again, the significance and the importance of these chapters. In spite of how small they are, in spite of the fact that our children can read them, and it seems so simple. بسيط جدا. لكن مع ذلك هذه السور مهمة جدا. سورة الفلق، سورة الناس، وسورة الإخلاص. لأن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم كان له علاقة قوية معها، مع كلها. يقرأ في الصباح، في المساء، بعد دبر كل صلاة. سبحان الله. فهذا شيء يدل على أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم كان عنده علاقة قوية مع هذه السور. هذا تدل على أهميتها. فهمتني شيخ؟ نعم. So that being the case, if that's what the Prophet ﷺ was doing, right? Every last one of us should think here, right? What kind of relationship do I have with those chapters? Because I know oftentimes people say, oh, my favorite chapter is Surah Yusuf, because it has a beautiful story in there, right? It's one of the few chapters that is in chronological order from beginning to end, right? It's a beautiful story. It has, you know what I'm saying? You have the main character, Yusuf alayhi salam, the protagonist, right? And you have the trials and tribulations that he goes through, and through those trials and tribulations, he has growth and development, right? That he goes through, and he's thrown in the well by his siblings, that he is, picked up by, slave traders, that he ends up having to be living the life of a slave. Then he is, subhanAllah, sexually assaulted by his master or his master's wife. Then he's in prison. He goes through all of these things. And yet, at the end, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grants him triumph. And not only does he grant him triumph, then he, you know what I'm saying, his whole family gets to return to him. SubhanAllah. It's a beautiful story. Or somebody might say Surah Yasin, right? Or Surah Rahman, or Surah whatever, right? But oftentimes you don't hear people say like, yo, my favorite surah, قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ الْفَلَقِ قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ النَّاسِ was Surah Al-Ikhlas, right? And yet, look at the engaging relationship that the Prophet ﷺ had with these surah, right? And so the last thing I'll say is that must mean there's something there. There's something significant and something powerful and important with those chapters. So you want to look at your own relationship with those chapters. طيب. So we move on. We already explained Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, so we're not going to explain that today. But we do want to, as a refresher, mention why the chapter was revealed. All right? We mentioned it last week in part and parcel because they were revealed together. Surah Al-Falaq and Surah Al-Nas, they were revealed together. Right? But again, you know what I'm saying? Lakir, you know, muraja is good so we can remember. All right, so anyways, the Prophet ﷺ, this is not too long after Sulh al-Hudaybiyah, the Prophet ﷺ, he essentially, khalas, he is safe from the Quraysh now, temporarily, right? They have essentially like a ceasefire treaty, which is supposed to be for an extended period of time, right? 10 years. They're supposed to have it for 10 years. There's no problem between them. So now, though, the Prophet ﷺ, right, he can shift his focus now, and there were some tribes in Medina, right? There were some tribes in Medina, in particular Jewish, right, who plotted against the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. And the Prophet ﷺ, he used to have a young Jewish servant. And at the time, he was ill. His servant, right, was ill. So the Prophet ﷺ, he visited him. And one of those tribes, they decided to use that opportunity to make an attempt on the life of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. Yeah, I need to try to kill him, right, or to try to harm him in some way. So they convinced this young boy, right, and his father to get the comb, right, the hair comb of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, right, and so that they can take some hair from it. So they can take the hair, like strands of hair of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, right, which they were able to do. They convinced them, the young boy and his father, and they did it, right? And subhanAllah, they committed an act where they took those, right, and tied knots, right, and performed sorcery on the Prophet ﷺ, and he was afflicted for give or take about 6 months. He was afflicted, right, feeling pain, and not only pain, but other things as well for about 6 months, right? And while this is happening, right, the Prophet ﷺ, from the other effects of the magic or the sorcery, was that the Prophet ﷺ essentially hallucinated, where he thought that he had done something and he hadn't, or he thought that he had been with his wife, right, on a given night, and then that wouldn't be the case, right? And so at this point, the angel Jibreel alayhi salam and another angel, they come and visit the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, and they're at his head, right? So he's laying down, and they're at his head, all right? And they're speaking to one another, the angels. And the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he later on tells about this. But they say to each other, this was the benefit of these two companions. They said, who did it? One asked, Annie, what is with this man? And they said, he's been, right? Somebody has done some magic to him. And they said, then who did it? He said, it was so and so, right? And in some narrations it mentions Labid ibn al-Asam, now. And then they said, all right, well, how did he do it? Well, they did it like this, i.e. tying the knots or whatever, right? 11 different knots. And he said, and where did they put it? Where did they place it? Once they, right, performed that, the knots, and they tied those knots, where did they put it? And it was placed in a bi'r, in a well, in a famous well in Medina, known as Dharwan, right? And it was put in there. He said he put it in that place with 12 or 11 knots. And then, right, so once they made this, the Prophet ﷺ aware of all this, right? Because the Prophet ﷺ, he's observing this as they're having that conversation, right? So this is all to his benefit so that he knows what's going on and so that he can understand. So he sent some companions to there. I believe it was Ali and Zubair ibn Awam. He sent them to go get it, right? And they found it, right? And then the Prophet ﷺ had recited on there, right? Surah Al-Falaq and Surah Al-Nas, right? And each ayah for each knot until it was all removed, right? And then, subhanAllah, you know, after this had happened, then the Prophet ﷺ, they said that he was alleviated of the sickness, right? And that he was okay after that. And so Aisha radiallahu anha, she says, don't you want to, you know, let people know what happened, right? And the Prophet ﷺ, he said, alhamdulillah, so long as I'm cured, right? That's the most important thing. And I don't want to spread, right, evil news amongst the people. I don't want to do that, right? And so they didn't, right? He said, وَأَكْرَهُ أَنْ أُثِيرَ عَلَى أَحَدٍ مِنَ النَّاسِ شَرًّا. I don't want to spread evil news amongst the people, right? Which we can take note of, because sometimes people, they hear something negative or something harmful, even if that harm is no longer standing, right? It'd be one thing if you tell somebody something harmful so that they can be protected and they can keep themselves away from that harm. That would be one thing. But if it's already done with and dealt with, right, then it's better not to spread that, right? But Allah musta'an, oftentimes people, right, they just spread shar and evil, which all that does is do what? It brings people down. It makes people, you know what I'm saying, as they would say in today's time, like bad vibes, right? And this is not what the Prophet ﷺ was about. Tayyib. But there is something important to note. And by the way, this, what I just mentioned, that's in Sahih Bukhari, right? That whole occurrence, that conversation with those, with the angels, right? And the sorcery, the Prophet ﷺ. So that happening to the Prophet ﷺ, that there is no doubt that the Prophet ﷺ did have sorcery done to him. However, there are some things to take note of and be aware of and understand. Number one, as far as the sorcery is concerned and the magic is being concerned, this did happen to the Prophet ﷺ, right? And him imagining things. However, with that being said, this had no effect on the wahi or revelation, right? And it is agreed upon by the companions, and it is the belief of the Muslims that the wahi is protected, and that the Prophet ﷺ is ma'asum, right, from having any distortions, misunderstandings, right, when it comes to revelation, right? And this is under the ayah where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, right, إِنَّا نَحْنُ نَزَّلْنَا الذِّكْرَ وَإِنَّا لَهُ لَحَافِظُونَ. That it is us who have sent down the revelation, or the remembrance, meaning the Quran, right? And Allah saying us, meaning the royal us, the royal we, he's referring to himself. وَإِنَّا لَهُ لَحَافِظُونَ. And we, i.e. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, will take care of it. He took on that responsibility of himself, which he did not do for any other revelation prior to Islam. He didn't do that for the Gospels. He didn't do that for the Torah, etc., right? Those books were sent by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but he never said that I will expressly protect them and preserve them. Tayyib. So that's something to understand. The Prophet ﷺ is ma'asum when it comes to revelation. So that does not impact that. Tayyib. So now we go on to the surah itself, right? بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل أعوذ برب الفلق من شر ما خلق ومن شر غاسق إذا وقب ومن شر النفاثات في العقد ومن شر حاسد إذا حسد. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, say, right? قل. So this is a command And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is commanding Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam to say, which by extension, everybody else who reads thereafter, say. All right? Say, I seek refuge with Allah, the Lord of the daybreak, from the evil of what He has created, and from the evil of the darkening night as it comes with its darkness, or the moon as it sets or goes away, which of course, when the moon sets or when it goes away, it becomes dark. And from the evil of those who practice sorcery or witchcraft when they blow in their knots, and from the evil of the envier when and while they are envy, or when he envies. So the first thing is the word qul, right, or say. So there are some who would say, why do we have to say qul a'udhu bi rabbin falaq? Why not just say a'udhu, right? Because if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was speaking to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and he said, you should say this, then why doesn't he just move on from whatever Allah told him to say? Why repeat the command? Y'all understand that? So actually, there is what's the Green Book, if y'all know, where they've actually removed the word qul, right? Y'all know what I'm talking about, the Green Book, right? All right, where they removed the word qul, and it just says, a'udhu bi rabbil falaq, or a'udhu bi rabbin nas, right? And this actually came up with the Sahaba, right? And they were asked later on, why do we say qul? And so the answer was, because that's the way the Prophet ﷺ said it. So that's how we say it, right? And what I want to point out is that the Quran, right? This is one of those subtle things that show the Quran is not from the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, right? That he simply, وَمَا عَلَى الرَّسُولِ إِلَّا الْبَلَاغِ. It is not upon the messenger except that he convey the message, right? So imagine like a mailman, right? He goes and he gets the mail from his post or whatever, right? And he delivers the mail. It's not his job to add, modify, subtract. He simply takes that letter and gives it to the receiver, right? He takes it from the sender, and gives it to the receiver. That's it. That's all he does. And in this sense, the Prophet ﷺ, this is his role. He simply takes the Quran from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? By way of Jibril alayhi salam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, speaks the Quran. Jibril alayhi salatu salam, he hears it, and then he goes to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and exactly how he's told to him, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he conveys it. And a lesson that we learn from this, brothers and sisters, is that that's how we should take the Quran. That we don't try to add, subtract, or modify. Whether in the wording, which is what we're talking about here, but also, right, in its meaning, right? That we try to say, well, it's 2023, we need to modify, adjust, or change, right? And you have a lot of people who, as one of our good brothers and sheikhs, he mentions, right? A lot of people have a full cup. You want to have an empty cup when you're coming to the Quran. Because if you got a full cup already, can you put anything in there? Can you put anything in the cup if it's already full? No. Some people, they come, either they already know, or they have an agenda, or they have something that they want to express, and they try to use the Quran to change, or to change it, to get their, whatever their agenda is, or whatever it is that they want. As opposed to, I'm coming to the Quran, and I'm looking to it for guidance. I don't have no preconceived notions. I don't have my own personal agenda. I'm coming to the Quran like an empty cup so that it can fill me up. What do I need to believe? What do I need to practice? What do I need to value? What is important? What is right? What is wrong? What is good? You take it as it is. And if there's something that needs to be changed, it's me. I need to change to fit the Quran. If I had an agenda, my agenda needs to change to be in line with the Quran. If I had my own personal, I like something, and instead of me looking for where I can find an evidence to say that what I'm doing is okay, I should say like, oh, I got to change that because the Quran says something different. Does that make sense, y'all? This is very, very important. All right, tayyib. So now we're told to what? A'udhu, to seek protection. And there's a couple of classical terms that I thought would be beneficial to bring here to kind of give us a picture of the word a'udhu and how the Arabs used to look at this word when they talk about seeking shelter and protection. So one of the words that they would use, things that they would use is uwidh, which is when you come to a tree, right, that's broad, right, and it has branches and everything, and imagine like you're in the desert, and you come to the tree for shade, for shelter, right, protection from the heat, right, its leaves and everything, it's giving you a kind of shelter. But in order for you to do that, you got to get close to the tree, right? You got to get close to it and right, and sit under it. And when you're sitting under that tree, it's providing you shade, it's providing you shelter, and so on, right? So that was one. And whenever you would go to a tree like that, it would be called uwidh, right? So there's a dhamma on the ayn, a shadda, and a kasra on a waw, right? Like that, uwidh. And then also, another thing that they would call is, right, when there's a meat that's like sticking to a bone, right? And the meat is like soft and weak, but it sticks to the bone. And of course, the bone is hard and strong, right? They would also call this uwidh, right? So here, right, the image that you get, right, for us, when we say a'udhu, is that we're going to Allah, like that tree, right? And we're not saying that Allah is like the tree, but us going for shelter under the tree, right? We're going to Allah to get that shelter, to get that shade, to get that protection, right? And a part of that is you need to what? Like that weak meat, you stick to the bone, right? How it's stuck to it, we have to stick to Allah and be close to Him and be near to Him. And in doing so, you get what? Then you get protection. Then you get shelter. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He tells us who you should be seeking protection with. Bi Rabbil Falaq, the Lord of Al-Falaq. And we went into great detail about the word Rabb, يعني أن الرب يعني تدل على يعني أن الله سبحانه وتعالى هو يعني رب كل شيء, right? ومن ضمن هذا أن الله سبحانه وتعالى يعني أنه رب, يعني أنه خالق. خلي بالك شوية يا محمد, أنه خالق والرازق والمدبر. يعني لا أحد يقول أنا خلقت هذه الأشياء, لا, ممكن يقول أنا أملك هذه الأشياء, يعني كل هذا يعني في ملكيتي أو كذا, لكن ما في أحد يقول أنا خالق لله سبحانه وتعالى طبعا, وهو خلق كل شيء, فلذلك هو رب. وكذلك أن الله سبحانه وتعالى ما دام أنه خلق كل شيء هو يملك كل شيء, فهو المالك. الله سبحانه وتعالى هو المالك, يملك كل شيء, يعني وملكيته يعني تماما. يعني حتى يعني في الدنيا بعض الناس يقول أنا الملك, صح؟ بعض الناس يقتل هذا ويقول خلاص أخرج من السجن, خلاص أنا أحييت هذا, نعم. لكن في الحقيقة هل هو يعني يملك تماما؟ لا. لكن الله سبحانه وتعالى يعني ملكيته يعني تمام, ويسلط على كل شيء, فهو المالك. والثالث أنه رازق, يعني هو رازق لكل شيء. فهمتني؟ نعم. فلذلك يعني هذا كله يعني من أسماء الله سبحانه وتعالى, الخالق, المالك, الرازق, نعم. فلذلك هو الرب, نعم. والرب يستحق أن يعبد, يعني هو يستحق العبادة عفوا, نعم. فهذا توحيد الربوبية وتوحيد الألوهية أو توحيد العبادة, نعم. طيب, فشرحنا هذا تماما يعني الأسبوع الماضي. طيب, so الرب, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Lord, right? But now, expanding on what we talked about last week, calling Allah Lord, and why he is the Lord, because of those actions and things that He does and nobody else does, that He's the creator, provider, the owner, the mudabbir, that He's the one who keeps everything going, is that He is the Lord of the daybreak. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about and describing Himself. Now, of course, the daybreak, right, is yani, if you think about it, the daybreak is the early morning, but also the word falaq, aside from meaning the dawn or the daybreak, it also means khalaq, like creation, right? Or the creation. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the Lord of the daybreak, and of course the daybreak covers over everything. So everything within the daybreak is, under Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's ownership, and that He's the Lord of everything. But also, falaq also means creation, right? So He's the Lord of creation. And then He goes on to say, min sharri ma khalaq. Oh, and the one thing I wanted to say before we move on to that second part is that when He says, bi rabbil falaq, remember, Allah is describing Himself, right? He says He's the Lord of the daybreak. He's the Lord of the creation, right? And so He's telling you, seek protection with Him, come to Him, right? Because when somebody's afraid, right? And we're talking about not afraid of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but afraid of anything else. Everything else is creation. So whatever it is that you're afraid of, it makes sense that you would go to and seek protection and ask for protection with the one who is the creator of His creation. So whatever it is that you're afraid of, He's the Lord of that thing. So it only makes logical sense that I'm going to go to Him because He made that thing. And whatever it is that I'm afraid of, He can protect me from it because He's the one who brought it into existence in the first place. And then He says, min sharri ma khalaq, from the evil, right? I'm seeking protection with the Lord of the daybreak, the Lord of the creation, from the evil that He created. Now, this brings up an important issue, right? And that is speaking about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? And saying that He created evil. And this is an issue that we have to understand. So I'm going to ask you all first, right? Is it appropriate for us to say Allah created evil? Is it appropriate to say that? No? Yes? Okay. So if it is, why is it appropriate? Ibrahim. Huh? Okay, that's compelling because Allah said so.
Yeah, it indicates that because He created everything. So, part of Qadr, we believe that He predestined good things and He also predestined bad things.
Okay, so in Qadr, right, we believe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right, not only did He destine good, but also the bitter. No, okay. And some of y'all said no. Who says no? That you don't, huh?
I think the ayah says the evil of that He created. So it is not, we're talking about directly the evil, but the evil of what He created. A human being can have evil and can also be good. Everything that Allah has created except His angels, and the prophets, they can have good and bad.
They can have good and bad.
Yeah.
Now,
So we are asking Allah protection of the evil of that He created, not exactly the evil. The people, let's say the nighttime, it could be, Allah created the night.
for sure, no.
Yeah. But the night, because it's dark, it can have evil, because animals can come out. People who want to do evil can come out and do what they need to do.
Okay, but didn't Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala create the night? Didn't He create those people?
He created.
Okay,
Yeah.
so then, isn't that the same as saying that Allah created the evil?
No, Allah doesn't create the evil. Allah created the thing that's going to do the evil.
Tayyib.
That's my understanding.
Okay. But what about shaitan? Didn't Allah create shaitan?
But when Allah created, Shaitan was not evil before. What Allah created.
So
And
what?
he
What?
started to become evil.
Okay. No. Okay. Jazakallah khair. Now. Yeah. Go ahead, brother.
Yeah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told in Surah Al-Baqarah that you created the shar and the good, and it's all within the wisdom and it's a test.
Interesting. It's the wisdom and it's a test from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But he did create the evil. Okay. So here, I'll repeat my question. All right. Let us all agree. Allah created everything. Do we agree on that? Huh? ذَلِكُمُ اللَّهُ رَبُّكُمْ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا هُ huh? خَالِقُ كُلِّ شَيْءٍ. Right? That is your Lord. ذَلِكُمُ اللَّهُ رَبُّكُم. That is Allah, your Lord, right? There's no God worthy of worship except Him, right? خَالِقُ كُلِّ شَيْءٍ. He created everything, right? Okay, khalas, we agree on that. So I'll repeat my question though. Can we say that, or is it appropriate to say that He created evil? We just said that He created everything. It's appropriate for us to say He created evil, right? And Ustad over here, he said yes. You said no, but rather He created things, and then those things, they made the shar, they made the evil. And you said, one more time, that it's wisdom of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that it's a test. No? Anybody else? You look like you want to say something, Shaykh Ramadan? No? They said what you were going to say? Yeah? Okay, alhamdulillah. Khalas. So, first thing you got to understand, right, is no doubt, like we already agree, Allah created everything. And no doubt that includes evil. Everything Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created. Right? Because there's only two types of existence. It's either creator, which is only Allah, or created, creation. And that's everything else. However, it is not appropriate. يعني هذا قلة الأدب مع Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for us to say that Allah, He created evil. Because it is not being balanced and is not being befitting in the way that we speak about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? He created everything, but no doubt we don't say Allah created evil. Now, if you said Allah created everything, then of course that by default automatically includes evil. But what I was asking about the statement to say Allah created evil, that is inappropriate to say. And we'll mention three reasons. All right. Number one, we already said هذا قلة الأدب مع الله. Having etiquettes with Allah. Having etiquettes in the way that you speak about Allah and when you speak about God. Right? Now, on a side note, on this idea about when you speak about God, right? Now, some of y'all know, or you know the phrase, put respect on it. You say my name. Any of y'all heard that phrase before? Put respect on my, right? Now, subhanallah, how many people, Muslims, mention Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's name all the time over the most frivolous, nonsensical, worthless things to the degree where Allah's name has no sanctity and respect. It doesn't elicit any kind of respect from the person who's saying it and the one who's hearing it. So because what's supposed to happen is when you say Allah's name, and you're supposed to put respect on His name, you're supposed to say it, right, when something is significant, when something is important. Because I would only invoke God's name because what I'm saying is important and I really need you to believe me. It's so significant what I'm saying right now. It's so important right now. And I feel like you don't think I'm being serious. Wallahi, billahi, tallahi, wa rabbil Kaaba. But now, it's like Skittles. They say it any time and all the time. People say it for everything. Y'all understand? Tayyib. And that also constitutes a lack of adab with the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because not only does a person say it, even the person who's listening now, right? He's not going to necessarily take that person any more seriously, even though they said wallahi, even though they said Allah's name, because everybody says it, and they say it all the time. And there's no like sanctity. Y'all, does that make sense? Y'all understand what I'm saying? Yeah. Okay. So now when we talk about Allah, again, that same concept and that idea of when I mention Allah's name, when I talk about Allah, it should be with adab and respect, even in the words that we choose. Because all it is is the wording that you're choosing. Allah created everything, and Allah created evil. When I say created everything, I'm saying he created evil, but I'm attributing at the same time, not simply evil, but that he created everything. There's a balance in what you're saying. When you say he created evil, it implies that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala only created evil, and it could be understood when you say that. Because there's people who have that belief, right? That there's two gods. There's a God of light and there's a God of darkness. There's one who does everything evil, and there's one who does everything good. And that's unbefitting to even in the way that we speak, that we talk about Allah that way. That's number one. Number two, right, is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, everything that he does is with a divine wisdom. Even in the creation of those things that are perceived to be evil, there is a hikmah baligha. We may understand it, and we may not. Case in point, what is happening to our brothers and sisters in Philistine? Nobody here would say that that is good. Anyone who, not just Muslims, anybody who has any semblance of common sense and humanity would say that that's evil. What's happening is wrong. But at the same time, even when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows for something bad or wrong or evil to happen, there is for a divine wisdom. I'll give one example of how, in spite of that terrible tragedy and how ugly that is and repulsive it is, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala return the land of the Muslims to the hands of the Muslims. Allahumma ameen, and grant them justice and ease. Allahumma ameen. One hikmah from that. We are taught in Islam that those who die, right, and they fight, duna malihi, right, wa ahli, who dies defending, fighting, right, whether it be for their wealth, their property, right, or their family, right, and they are killed, for who is shaheed, they are martyrs. So one hikmah that we can take from that, right, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is doing something that is, for all intents and purposes, seemingly evil. We believe that every one of those people, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, that they will be, inshallah, shaheed, right? So long as they said, La ilaha illallah, Muhammadur Rasulullah, right? And they died believing in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that they would be shaheed. And of course, that wouldn't happen unless they died, right? And so even in that evil, right, there's a divine wisdom, and that's just one, right? Tayyib. So we said number two then. We said number one is adab, etiquette with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the way that we speak about him. Number two is the divine wisdom, right? Allah does everything with the divine wisdom. And then thirdly is, in which, by the way, take note, all of y'all said exactly what it is. He said that Allah created everything. He said he said with wisdom, right? And then here's the last one. The accountability, right, for evil, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, ظَهَرَ الْفَسَادَ فِي الْبَرِّ وَالْبَحْرِ بِمَا كَسَبَتْ أَيْدِي النَّاسِ, right? That evil has become apparent both in the land and in the sea, and even in the water. Subhanallah, right? بِمَا كَسَبَتْ أَيْدِي النَّاسِ, by what has been wrought by the hands of man. So no doubt, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he created shaitan, but it's shaitan who made the choices that he made. He decided to become evil. He decided to do what he did. And the same thing, right, with anyone who does something wrong or does something evil. Right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created them, and then they make a choice. Right? And so they are accountable, and they have a role in the presence of evil. Not that they create evil, but they choose to do evil. Right? And so the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, he even mentions in a dua, which is in Sahih Muslim, right? Where he mentions that all good is attributed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَالشَّرُّ لَيْسَ إِلَيْكَ, but we do not attribute evil to you, O Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? But that evil, right, is because of, as is mentioned here in this ayah, because of what the people have done. Right?
Isn't that where the free will comes to play?
Of course. No, for sure. For sure. But is that clear? And this is very important, because if you think about this understanding, right, is deeply helpful, when you talk with non-Muslims and you talk with other people with other religions, right? Because they would say, like I mentioned earlier, right, that oftentimes they have like a duality, right? Even Christians, for example, they'll say God is he's the Lord of light, etc. And then the devil, they attribute powers of creation to him, that he creates evil, as opposed to, right, he's making a choice. No doubt he's doing evil, he's doing wrong, but he doesn't create. Y'all understand that? He doesn't create. But you'll have people who say that there's a God of darkness and a God of light, right? Or they'll struggle with the idea that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has a divine wisdom that we may not understand, right? And so even though there might be evil present, right? People say, why? Because God is all good. And God is, you know what I'm saying? Why would he allow, suffering or bad things to happen and so on and so forth? You say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has a divine wisdom, and sometimes you understand it, sometimes it's clear. Why do poor people exist? Well, if there were no poor people, then there would be no generous people. There would be no strong people who are humble and help them and aid them, right? And uplift them. That would not exist because everybody would be the same. Same thing with strong and weak, ignorance and knowledge. You don't have one without the other, right? And so, subhanAllah, this, alhamdulillah, does away with that confusion. It does away with that idea that there's another or separate creator, and it reinforces that there is one creator. And then the adab and the etiquette that we should have when speaking about him. So we move on then, inshallah. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala goes on to say, so that's min sharri ma khalaq. Wa min sharri ghasiqin idha waqab. And he goes on to say, and from the evil of the darkening, or meaning the night, right, as it comes with its darkness. And no doubt, subhanallah. And I almost forgot one more thing from min sharri ma khalaq. We think of evil that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created, jinn, shaitan, demons, sorcery, evil people, things that are harmful to us, etc. And we think of outside things. But not even before that, also ourselves, right? We say, وَنَعُوذُ بِاللَّهِ مِنْ شُرُورِ أَنفُسِنَا وَمِنْ سَيِّئَاتِ أَعْمَالِنَا. From the evil of our own selves, whether it be that nafsun lawama, right, that regretful soul, because it encourages itself to do wrong, right, our base desires or our carnal desires, right, when those things are used wrong, that's evil. When we disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that's evil. And then of course, وَمِنْ سَيِّئَاتِ أَعْمَالِنَا, and then there's evil consequences that comes from the evil that you do. When you do something wrong to disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you're asking him to protect you from that, وَنَعُوذُ بِاللَّهِ مِنْ شُرُورِ أَنفُسِنَا, right? But then also the consequences that come with that, whether it be in this life or in the hereafter, right? And so the last thing I wanted to point out that I'd almost forgotten is not simply the outside forces, whether it's seen or unseen, but even our own selves. Sometimes, right, we can be our own worst enemy. It could be laziness. It could be gluttony, where we want too much. The Prophet ﷺ, again, for his own soul, he said, أعوذ بالله من نفس لا تشبع. I seek protection, right, with you, O Allah, right, from a soul, right, from a nafs that is never satisfied, that is never satiated, right? And when somebody has is like that, they have that kind of character and that type of personality, they harm themselves, right? And so included in that shar, what I want to point out is our own selves, that we got to keep that in mind and remember that. طيب. Then it says, min sharri ghasiqin idha waqab. And this is, of course, because there's so many evil things that occur and that come out, especially at night, right? That's why the Prophet ﷺ used to tell us, right, the sunnah is when the sun is starting to set at Maghrib, you're supposed to bring in your children. They shouldn't be outside at that time, right? And that you're supposed to make yani ta'awudat, right? Ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for protection because, right? Obviously, a lot of things from human beings, right, go down at nighttime. Whether it's stealing, whether it's, you know what I'm saying, colluding, conspiracies, people taking things that don't belong to them, robbing, killing, so many different things. Oftentimes it's at night, but then also from the jinn, right, because they actually spread out in the night, which is why the Prophet ﷺ mentioned us about coming in, right, at night. And so we ask for protection from that. And notice these things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is mentioning, these are, broad general things so that they encompass every type of evil. Yani whatever that evil might be at night. Whatever evil might be that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created. Yani you're seeking protection from all of it. But then he goes now and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala narrows it down. The other two are a little more general, other couple of ayahs, but now he's going to get more specific, right? And he says what? وَمِن شَرِّ غَاسِقٍ إِذَا وَقَبْ. No, we said that, right? That's the night. The غَاسِقٍ is the night, إِذَا وَقَبْ, right? When it comes or when the moon, when it retreats. But now, وَمِن شَرِّ نَفَّاثَاتِ فِي الْعُقَدِ. And this is, and from the evil of those who practice sorcery when they blow in their knots, right? And we already mentioned this is, right, something that had been done to the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. And the most common way that sorcery is practiced, it's not what people think of as like some wands and there's like some, sparks that fly, and you say some couple of incantations and it's not like that, right? It is unseen, right? It is unseen. And it is often with the knots that are being tied. That's the most common way, right? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions nafathat, and that's the feminine form, and it's plural. Not because it's only or exclusively women who practice this, but overwhelmingly or majority of, it's mostly women, but also men. They do this as well. And they blow in these knots, and they might say the names of shayateen, etc., blowing on them, invoking and calling on them, right, to ask for power from them. And this is something that used to happen in the time of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, and to this day it still practiced and happens. There is a video online that you could check out. There is someone who used to be a sorcerer, right, who made tawbah. And he explains some of the things that they do in order to be able to enlist the aid of jinn and to be able to do what they do. And just to give you akramakumullah, just some of the things that they have to do. First of all, they have to openly and outright commit kufr. And they have to do blasphemous and vile, disgusting things like wipe feces on the Quran or menstrual blood, akramakumullah, on the Quran, right? To show, right, that they are genuine in their abandonment of faith in Allah, right? That they're willing to do, right, whatever it takes. And in doing so, then they will get the allegiance of, or I should say the aid of their jinn, right? And the types of things that it will do most commonly is to either make someone, right, fall in love with someone else. And typically, if you see someone who didn't like someone in general, and then all of a sudden, like out of nowhere, they're just deeply, madly in love with somebody else when they just yesterday used to detest and hate that person, there might be something there. Or to break someone up. Similarly, right? Everything seems good. Everything is fine. It's been going well for 4, 5, 6, 10 years. Then all of a sudden, again, just like that, all without any, for no, seemingly no reason, hate, detest. They're like, it's like World War III between them. They can't stand each other or be together for whatever reason, right? Halas, that's also a good indication. But to either bring together or to separate. And there's other things too, to cause somebody to be ill, to hurt somebody, to make somebody, go crazy and so on. But the thing here is that when it comes to jinn, right, people oftentimes think like that you can see jinn and so on. In their true normal form, you do not see jinn. Typically, people do not see, right? So someone tells you, right, the little jinn stories when you're sitting around or whatever, or they say, wallahi, when I was 15 years old, I was at home by myself and I saw it in the window, wallahi. No. They do because they are allowed to change shapes and their forms, right? You might see as a snake, as a rat, right? And some other forms, snake, a rat, and I want to say like dog, but you're not going to see like you would see like in a movie or some horror movie or something like that. That's not how it is, because typically it is unseen, right? And if you look at what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us to seek refuge and protection with, all of the things that he mentions now are all unseen things. But what we do need to know, though, is that they are real. Even it's mentioned in the Quran, right? كان رجال من الإنس يعوذون برجال من الجن فزادوهم رهقا, right? That there were men who they used to, when they were traveling, if they came across a valley, right, and they're afraid of what might be in that valley or in that area, right, they would invoke or try to ask for and seek protection. Ya'udhu, right? Like we're told to do with Allah. Allah mentions that they used to do that for a jinn, right? From the men of the jinn. And what would happen is, فَزَادُهُمْ رَهَقًا. And it would only make them either go crazy, or it would make them, the men themselves, become more vile, i.e. that they would be more steeped in sins, ma'asiyah, and disobedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. فَزَادُهُمْ رَهَقًا, right? The point, though, is that what? That it is real, right? And it is something to seek protection from. طيب. So we keep going. And I'll mention one last thing about it being real from the Quran, right? Because we mentioned about the jinn and people seeking protection with jinn, but as far as sorcery and magic being concerned, in Surah Al-Baqarah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, وَمَا أُنزِلَ عَلَى أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم وَمَا أُنزِلَ عَلَى الْمَلَكَيْنِ بِبَابِلَ هَارُوتَ وَمَارُوتَ وَمَا يُعَلِّمَانِ مِنْ أَحَدٍ حَتَّى يَقُولَا إِنَّمَا نَحْنُ فِتْنَةٌ فَلَا تَكْفُرْ فَيَتَعَلَّمُونَ مِنْهُمَا مَا يُفَرِّقُونَ بِهِ بَيْنَ الْمَرْءِ وَزَوْجِهِ. All right? وَمَا هُمْ بِضَارِّينَ بِهِ مِنْ أَحَدٍ إِلَّا بِإِذْنِ اللَّهِ. Right? It says they used to teaching mankind magic and that which was revealed to the two angels in Babel, Harut and Marut. Nor did the angels, those two angels, teach it to anyone until they would tell them, we are only a temptation. We're teaching you this, but it's only a temptation. Therefore, don't disbelieve in the guidance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? And from these two angels, people learned that by which they could cause division between a man and his wife, which is why we mentioned this is the most common one. So this is expressly mentioned in the Quran. طيب. And lastly, وَمِن شَرِّ حَاسِدٍ إِذَا حَسَدٍ. And from the evil of the person who has hasad, the one who does hasad, when they are in the act of making hasad. And so hasad is simply jealousy, right? But this type of jealousy, though, is when you want something that someone else has, right? And it bothers you that other person even has it, right? So hasad could be that you don't even necessarily want it. It bothers you that they have it, that they have some type of good, some type of barakah and blessing from Allah, right? That bothers you. And and usually it is that you want it. And not only do you want it, you wish they didn't have it. You wish it was only you that had it and not them. This is, in general or in brief, this is hasad, right? And this is, subhanAllah, almost like an evil arrow from someone's soul, right? And it can have real world effects and impact on people. right? That somebody becomes sick or somebody becomes ill, right? Similar, same like the evil eye, right? But this jealousy, right? Wa'iyadu billah, is something that is again dangerous, although it's different from the evil eye. And there are two types of jealousy. There's a jealousy that we're allowed to have, and there's hasad where we're not. Hasad is just simply, I want what that person has, and I wish they didn't have it. That's haram, period. But there's something called ghibta, which is, I wish I had what they had so that I could do what they do. It's not that I want them that it be taken away from them. I just wish I had what they had so I could do what they do. And the Prophet ﷺ mentions two instances where this is allowed. Number one, if someone is blessed with wealth from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? إذا أتى الله سبحانه وتعالى شخصا مال طيب ففي هذا الوقت أن يحسده فهذا جائز. وهذا الحسد ليس حسد في الحقيقة، هو غبط، وهو أنني أريد هذا المال أو أتمنى يعني يكون عندي، وليس أنني ما أريد يعني أو يزيل عنده، لا، بس أنا أريده حتى أفعل ما يفعل. هو يتبرأ ما شاء الله كثير، يتبرأ للفقراء والمساكين والأرملة وينفق عليهم ما شاء الله تبارك الله. أتمنى هذا، أكون مثله حتى أفعل مثل ما يفعل. فهمت؟ هذا جائز، بل هذا يعني ممدوح. Right? So it's allowed that if somebody's wealthy and they take care of orphans, they take care of the poor, they build masajid and stuff like this, all for the sake of Allah, then it's allowed to wish to have what they have, right? Not that it's taken away from them, but simply I have what they have so I could do what they do. That's allowed. And then also the Prophet ﷺ said if someone was blessed with wisdom, hikmah, and they teach that to others, that they teach others beneficial knowledge, right? And hikmah. Again, it's allowed to wish that you had the wisdom that they had so I can do what they do, that they help others in the community, that they teach others, that they make sulh between people, etc. Right? طيب. So this is وَمِن شَرِّ حَاسِدٍ إِذَا حَسَدٍ. So jealousy is a sickness and a disease of the heart, and it's like a cancer and which spreads and consumes everything. Most of the time when jealousy exists, it has to do with material possessions, right? In matters of the dunya, it causes a person to wish evil upon someone else and what they themselves do not. This feeling preoccupies the mind of the envious person and leads them to their destruction in their dunya and in their akhirah. طيب? So now we want to close with what are some takeaways of this surah. What can we take away from this surah? Number one is Tawheed, the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that isti'adah, right? Seeking protection from Allah is a tremendous act of worship, right? And it is a practical application and manifestation of our belief in the oneness of Allah, that I only seek protection with Him, right? That I only seek protection with Him and that He's the only one, right? In the complete and holistic sense, the one who can protect me. Whether it's from unseen forces like sorcery, jinn, the ain, or whether it's from real physical forces. Allah is the one who created all of those things, so He's the one who can protect me from all those things. So number one is Tawheed. Secondly is the example of the Prophet ﷺ in how he had a engaged relationship with the Quran, and that it was in all of these different areas and aspects of his life. The Quran was present, both in his decisions and even in his reciting, right? So when he went to sleep, the Quran was with him, right? That he's reading there. After every salah, he's with him. That means in the morning, in the middle of the day, when he's at work, when comes home, before he goes to sleep, right? When you pray the last prayer, it's throughout. The adhkar al-sabah wal-masa. قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ الْفَلَقِ and قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ النَّاسِ are there. The Quran is with the Prophet ﷺ throughout his day. And that should be how we should be. that the Quran is with us throughout our day. Not عند المناسبات فقط. عند الزواج، عند موت الشخص، أو عند يعني عزاء وتعزية، ثم الفاتحة، أو عند القبر الفاتحة. لا لا لا. Right? It should be with us all the time, and that it should be engaged, which of course leads us to the third thing, which is that means we got to learn, in the broader sense, we need to learn Arabic, right? But also activities like this, learning and studying the tafsir of the Quran, that be a regular part of your the diet of your Islamic knowledge. Some people, they want to study nahu. Some people, they want to study fiqh. Some people, they want to study these different things, which are all important. But no doubt, at the helm and at the head should be يعني kalamullah. وَخَيْرُ الْكَلَامِ kalamullah. The best of speech is the speech of Allah. And if it's the best of speech, then I should be trying to understand as much as I possibly can, which means I should be learning it. Tayyib. And then fourthly, right, is that using these regularly to protect yourself from the ain, from sorcery, right, and from hasad, jealousy, right? This is what you should be busy with more so than being afraid of those things. It's natural to have some type of fear and concern, but you should be more concerned with connecting with Allah and using these, whether to prevent or if it happens, then to remove it. Because look at one of the hadith that we mentioned is that the Prophet Aisha mentioned that when the Prophet either shtaka, when he complained about having some type of pain or something, then he would also read it as well. Right? Just last night, I met with a family. Just last night, met for like 2 hours, and one of their big concern is that their son had been stricken with some type of sorcery and magic, right? Which is possible, right? Or some ayn, mumkin, right? But they were preoccupied with trying to determine that, as opposed to what's the action plan that we can take to protect ourselves, whether it did come or if we could prevent it from even happening or from further increasing or getting worse. They should be preoccupied with that, protection from Allah, as opposed to, is it this shaitan, was it this person, was it that person, and so on and so forth. That stuff, yeah, you got to figure out so you can protect yourself later on, distance myself from whatever, but this is more important. Because in a lot of our cultures, in our quote-unquote back home cultures, the ayn, hasad, some people, right, wa'iyadu billah, they have an unhealthy fear to the extent where they disobey Allah. Because of, I remember when I was at the Jamia, and I'll close with this, I remember I had classmates, we'll say from multiple countries, I'll just say all over the Muslim world, where many of them would say there were sorcerers in their villages and in their towns, right, where people were outright afraid, afraid of, you don't mess with that guy, everybody knows. If something happens to him, your auntie's going to be sick, your uncle's going to die, your crops are going to fail. You don't, and if you cross him, if you say, you better make him happy. Which goes against the first thing I said was the takeaway, which is what? Tawheed. Being connected to Allah, being afraid of Allah, because if you're afraid of Him, listen, your fear of Allah is supposed to remove your fear of anything else, because He made everything else. You can't hurt me unless Allah wills it. So I'm not afraid of you. I'm going to the one who made you. If you trying to hurt me, I'm not afraid of that. If my boss he says he's got control over my paycheck, no, he doesn't. Allah has control over everything. وصلى الله وسلم على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Lord of the magnificent throne, the mighty and the powerful and the majestic, and by His most perfect names and His most excellent of attributes, to send His peace and blessings on the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And we ask Him and Him alone, right, that He give aid and victory to our brothers and sisters in Palestine. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have mercy and grant martyrdom for those who have passed and those who have died fighting in His cause, and those who have died defending the lands of the Muslims and the blood of the Muslims. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to heal and cure those of them who are sick and those who are wounded. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant strength and fortitude to those amongst them who are left alive. May He grant them the fortitude and the strength to continue to move forward. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bring justice and to bring peace to the land of the Muslims, and for all of those Muslims who are fighting in His cause and for cause of La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant them strength and victory. Innahu waliyu dhalik wa qadirun alayhi wa akhir da'wan alhamdulillah rabbil alameen.
Yes, is it possible to do this class so you have time